peace. This is how we start things in hip-hop culture. Peace, y'all. But really, you can't think of a better way to start something. We end that way too, right? Just start with peace, end with peace. First of all, it's a real pleasure to be here. Thank you, Lynn, for inviting me, and to your co-organizers. It's an honor and a pleasure. I also want to thank ACT, Asian Communication Technologies, and Kim Sawchuk, and also the funding body, SSHRC, for assistance in being here. It's a great network. They're doing great work, and I'm very honored to be part of it. I'm going to try and go fast. I mean, you know, I could do this in half an hour or 40 minutes or 2 hours, or we could be here all day. We have 20 minutes. This is part of my ongoing work, and I'm looking at hip-hop in a cultural context as somewhat, there's going to be some overlaps, I think, with what Martin presented as well. And I like to think that this is a collaboration, that me and Ice-T came up with this title. You may know Ice-T from Law & Order on your television screens, but he's been a rapper for about 35 years. And I did an interview with him. I've been interviewing quite a few of hip-hop celebrities, and this is a term that he shared in an interview. Okay, I'm going to start, I'm checking the slides. It's a little different here than on my computer. But part of the catalyst for this research began in 2007, that I was at a annual Association for Retired People convention in Boston. I was too young to be a member then, but I'm eligible now, and they're recruiting. But I noticed something in the program for the following morning. It was listed as a fitness health event, and it caught my attention. So the next day I went, and those big hotel ballrooms, and I watched people come in, people in their 50s, some in their 60s, I assume, some maybe in their 70s, going by visual appearance, possibly in their 80s, gray hair, fellows with no hair, canes, walkers, and at the appointed time, a booming bass rhythm came on the sound system, and onto the stage bounced LL Cool J. It was something. Now, LL came into the hip-hop scene at age 16 in 1984. So, and even at this point, and around 1989, he did an interview in the New York Times and suggested that even before he was 10, he heard the vestiges of hip-hop. He experienced early hip-hop culture in his Queens neighborhood. So in a sense, this makes him a hip-hop native, one of the first and certainly one of the longest celebrities to have existed within hip-hop and grown old in and with hip-hop. These are the founding fathers, that often referred to as the founding fathers. And if there's a Mount Rushmore for hip-hop, these three figures would be on it. And I always grew up thinking that, you know, the hip-hop founders they must be very old. They've been in us all their lives, all my life in many ways. And so I'm a little shocked to realize that they're just a couple years older than me. And the other thing about this is that the oldest one, the guy on the far right, Kool Herc, is only 60. And he started in hip-hop, or what we consider hip-hop today, when he was about 18. So hip-hop was initially created by and for young people. But as these individuals indicate, it's been quite some time since this has been a youth culture per se. These are some of the terms that get applied to hip-hop, and they come with notions of authenticity and authority. So, the aforementioned individuals, I would say, fit pretty much all of those top categories. They fulfill every one of those criteria. But an artist who maybe is 45, somebody like Jay-Z, who I think is 45, doesn't necessarily fit into all of the categories. And so this is to look at a little bit of how the discourses and the terminology that are so common in hip-hop and applied widely, even in hip-hop studies, the academic scholarship, really aren't very precise. So, you know, there's somebody who comes in much later and is only 45 now. They aren't a founding father. They aren't a pioneer. They probably would be considered veterans. They may not be elder statesmen or some sort of living legend. That's for the outside individuals to determine after enough time has passed. They aren't architects. They didn't design the blueprint. They maybe contributed some work on an addition to the building, but they weren't the founders in that regard. They may guard the tradition, most do, although some people would say that Jay-Z is a one-percenter MC, somebody who represents the ultra-elite, maybe isn't really a carrier of the tradition. And then there's the term OG that's in the title, and Ice-T introduced that from West Coast gang culture, brought it into hip-hop, but it's become kind of vernacularized and generalized. So any of us here are scholars, have been in the game for maybe 20, 25, 30 years. We're scholar OGs, right? Somebody who works for the government is a public service OG. And OG means original gangster initially. Now we can maybe just say old guys. And then the other thing is, we have back in the day and the golden age and the what I call old school. These are also slushy terms that get used an awful lot. My back in the day and somebody who's 30s back in the day and some of my students are 18 and 19 back in the day or old school clearly aren't going to be using the same temporal and historical references. So again, this is just to draw attention to a kind of language that increasingly becomes less certain and more slushy without specificity. Represent. Now, the notion of representing has been taken up in all kinds of contexts in hip-hop studies, and often it's taken up in regard to representing for one's spatial identity, the affiliations and associations one makes to place, right? So in an initial and proximate sense, you represent for your neighborhood, for your hood, right? Maybe, you represent for your city, possibly for your region, East Coast, West Coast. And there's something spatial that's been wrapped up. But I've noticed in hip-hop, and this is something that's emerging with a lot more urgency, is something called age representing, where individuals still take on this aspect of affiliations and identity, but instead of solely connecting it or more strongly connecting it to spatiality, it's also having this temporal component. Individuals are identifying themselves with where they are in the generational stages in the life course. So Melle Mel in 1984. 1984, I mean, hip-hop is still very new. And he takes issue with the then upstart new group called Run DMC. Maybe some of you have heard of them, one of the biggest hip-hop acts to this day. And he suggests that, 1984, you guys just showed up. You just had a hit last year. You didn't help create anything. I've been doing this for 7 years. So he's age representing, positioning himself in a position of authority according to his generational and age status. We have Kool Moe Dee, way back, 1987, and his suggestion is what he does is he rhymes using different kinds of cadence, tempo, language, showing, I was there, I used that, I know how it's done. Watch me flip between then and now. Only somebody with that experience and that know-how can do that, a kind of age representing. And here's an example going way back, Just Ice.
Talk about dope, dope. Yo, Just, give me one more verse, please.
Let's rest, so I can take all breath, cause I'm bearing the truth and nothing less. No disrespect intended, but I have to show you. If I didn't say your name, that means I did not know you. To get to the point, to make it clear. If I don't say your name, that means you was not there. It's true, I'm from the old school. I'm the professor and they are my pupils.
A couple things there that you can see by the clothes he's wearing and the way he's moving. There's a certain kind of temporality of the past. If you close your eyes and you know hip-hop, you could recognize that is probably late 80s. And the style, what he's wearing and all of those sort of things. But also the discourse. He's suggesting that, he refers to back in the day and old school. In fact, the year before this, his first album was called Back to the Old School. So even in 1986, he's referring to something, earlier. And then he refers to the distinction between being a professor and the pupils. The professor ostensibly more knowledgeable, more experienced, somebody with authority to teach, and the pupil, arguably less experienced, less knowledgeable, somehow in a subordinate position comparatively. Here's another example of age representing from 2007. I'm going to let this run a little bit. The sound of the trains and the graffiti bring us back to a moment in time. And also, if you know your technologies, and look at the technology that the studio producer is using, DJ Premier.
for my next number, I'd like to return to the
Classic. Times.
Live State Classic.
Classic. I'm better than I ever been.
I rock him, the fiend of a microphone.
Yeah, is y'all ready for 2007? It's now another drought. Everybody's a killer. Wow, we bugging out. Since 86, showing the crowd what I'm about. And they still wanna know when the album coming out. Ask the teenagers, OGs, and ask the kids what their definition of classic is.
Timeless, so age don't count in the booth when your flow stays submerged in the fountain.
Timeless, so age don't count in the booth when your flow stays submerged in the fountain of youth. I mean, that's why he's on everybody's top 3, right there. But there's a number of things going on. That he's claiming classic status, and that's the sort of thing that's often, certainly related to time and endurance. Some of the things that Martin mentioned, but also it's something that's often bestowed from the outside, right? That's classic. He's claiming it for himself, age representing, taking it on. But he's established in a way that nobody's going to take issue with that. I mean, damn, that's Rakim Allah, man. So that's, he's claimed something and grabbed it for his own identity. There's another thing, he refers to still in there, and it came up, I think, in Amelie with this morning's, just before lunch, the notion of still. And he uses it in a different way, but Lynn and I have talked about this, so I just mentioned it, that this idea of still, right, or stillness. And in a traditional kind of notion, it suggests rooted, unmoving, right, anchored in some way. But there's also this idea of stillness, what we also motivate, certainly when we're talking about older folks and in the arts as well, in a lot of places, that there's an idea of enduringness, motion, inertia, right? He's still got it. He's still making contributions of a meaningful and valuable nature to the culture, to the scene, right? And so there's this kind of a duality going on where he's refuting the former notion of still and taking on this idea of in motion, still building, still creating. Now, some of the theory that I'm working through, and you saw mention as well in Martin's presentation to Andy Bennett, who's doing some wonderful work and important work on age and popular music. And I also draw from Margaret Morgenroth Gillette, professor at Brandeis University in the Boston area, and she talks about being aged by culture. This idea that, in fact, we're surrounded by issues and images and discourses of aging, and we take them on ourselves. In fact, we mobilize them, and we're complicit in a way in this cultural aging. So the jokes, the offhanded, maybe banal, mundane references to, graying hair or disappearing hair, to the crow's feet and wrinkles on our faces, the need for Cialis or Viagra, or cosmetic surgery at some extreme edge of things, right? That this is a kind of cultural aging, and all, of course, the media images that go along with it. And there's a suggestion that we're, in fact, aging into decline, that these discourses are often perceived as something of erosion, corrosion, deficit of some nature. So here's a quick example of a decline narrative, and it's not from hip-hop in any way. It's a Sunday morning cartoon or comic strip in the Boston newspaper. But the references to hip-hop are quite, I think, explicit, certainly if you know a little bit about hip-hop, as most of you, I think, do. The references to breakdancing, right? Here he refers to Bust a Move. That's a 1980 song by Young MC, one of the Grammy Award-winning songs, Bust a Move. And then the idea of hip replacement hop, right, as being some sort of thing that he's going to hurt himself and perhaps die. Well, somebody who has a titanium hip, it doesn't end your life. It slows you down, but it doesn't end things. Within hip-hop as well, this decline narrative is mobilized and motivated. So maybe a little bit, again, what Martin suggested, that older MCs, artist audiences suggest that younger artists aren't up to par. They don't know the culture. They don't have the skills. I guess they're doing the best they can, but it ain't very much, that sort of thing. And these shirts, I think, reflect that. Now, I really love this one. I think maybe, many of us, I include myself here, that, when we were kids, we looked at our parents' shenanigans and going-ons and what they did and looked up and said, I don't know about this, man. I'm not sure I want any part of it. But I like it because in a hip-hop sense, it's Soulja Boy who in his late teens, early 20s, it's both irreverent in a way and honest, right? that he's sort of looking askance at the older generation, but he's also suggesting, he's like, I'm honestly not sure that shit's what's up, and he doesn't want any part of it. So there's this concern or fear of aging within hip-hop. Now, I put this up, and I'm never quite sure what to do with it, but I'm not sure I like it, and I think because it's being played for a joke. The juxtaposition is about age-inappropriate behaviors and styles, right? That we haven't seen this yet. And so we can chuckle at it, and just, I include myself here. We laugh at it, but once we get past the laughter, what is it we're laughing at, right? What exactly is the crux of the joke? And when I talk to people like Ice-T and LL and Chuck D and Peppa from Salt and Pepper and any number of these artists, they say, we can't wait to be in this age. We can't wait to see hip-hoppers who grew up and came of age in hip-hop as they hit 75 or 80 or however old whatever age we might want to project on these two images of individuals, right? So this is something that may occur, right? And as much as that somebody like Paul McCartney or Mick Jagger can go out there and prance around or wear whatever we might associate with a certain kind of, fun performative style, why not hip-hop? We're not there yet, but we have every reason to believe in about another 20 years we will see these things. So, some of the distinctions are aged conflicts that go on. And this is maybe a common one between younger generation and older generation. But in terms of hip-hop, it plays out across the hip-hop generation and the civil rights generation. And in 2002, Todd Boyd published a provocation in a book called The New HNIC, Head Nigger in Charge, The Death of Civil Rights and the Reign of Hip-Hop. And the suggestion is, in fact, that with hip-hop, there's new sensibilities, new understandings of the world, but certainly new tools for defining and expressing identity and political urgencies and that sort of thing. And the last part, the quote there, is really similar to Bob Dylan's 1984, The Times That Are Changing, where he suggests, parents, if you can't lend a hand, get out of the way. So Todd Boyd notices some of these same dynamics and tensions going on between the civil rights and the hip-hop generation. In 1988, the Fresh Prince and DJ Jazzy Jeff released this track, and there's a particular line where he is upset with his mother, where Fresh Prince is upset with his mother for buying him clothes from 1963, right? That he don't go to school looking crazy, looking whack. But 1963, of course, is entirely significant in the context of civil rights, right? The Great March on Washington and Martin Luther King Jr.'s I Have a Dream speech. So here's a quick example of that tension in being articulated. And then we have what M.K. Asante Jr. refers to as the post-hip-hop generation, which is to say that these tensions that were previously, hip-hop and outside of hip-hop are taking shape in hip-hop as it evolves and grows and expands over time. And this idea that, again, the politics, the urgencies, the dangers, the ways of showing anger, of showing love, nurture, all these things, and I think we can point to the Black Lives Matter movement as a really crucial one, are already showing clear breaks or distinctions and differences from the older hip-hop generation. So somebody like Tef Poe from Ferguson, Missouri, who I had an opportunity to meet and talk with, he brings his hip-hop sensibilities to his activist role. And he brings his activist sensibilities to his role as a hip-hop MC. And appropriately, he uses Twitter to say, this ain't your daddy's civil rights movement. An aspect of aesthetics, and I'm starting to move towards an end here, that when we talk about flow, this is something in hip-hop that's really common and standard. So how an MC rides on the rhythm, rides that beat, right? How a b-boy or b-girl moves their body and turns and twists and positions themselves in time and tempo to the rhythms, right? Or the arc of a spray can as somebody gets their paint up on a wall, right? Flow is absolutely crucial to hip-hop. Andre 3000, half of the Atlanta hip-hop group Outkast, articulates a fear of a sort, where he's afraid of old flow. And I call this a fear of his future self, suggesting that none of us guys have new flow. We all are sort of stuck with this old flow. And he sees it as almost a point of desperation, and he's tempted to walk away from hip-hop, as he suggested in interviews and the like, suggesting that nobody wants to be that old flow guy. Well, what he's done is sort of denied the possibility of aging into a new kind of creativity. In fact, adapting a flow, or adopting new kinds of flow, or using the flow he has to make sense of the world he lives in as somebody who's crossing into and through middle-aged into third age or young old, as some of the terminology frames it. So what he's done, in fact, is aging him out of a possibility of remaining creative in hip-hop. Stephen Katz, one of the foremost critical age theorists at Trent University, has looked at this and suggests that, well, as we do old, as we progress age, as we progress through the life course, we're necessarily going to find new metaphors, new language, new means of expressing, or as he suggests, representing our age at different junctures along the way. So I come to this, and this is an example that Sean Carter, otherwise and perhaps better known as Jay-Z, teamed up with the Swiss Hublot watch company. And I was going to bring watches for everybody, but they held them at the border. I'm sorry, right? I had about 40 for y'all. But the suggestion that, that Jay-Z is acknowledging his own age in the context of his brand deals and brand management, and that the CEO of Hublot somehow accommodated that they wanted to sort of acknowledge he's aging and he's not just that kid from the Marcy Projects in Bed-Stuy area of Brooklyn, but he's matured into not just a businessman, but a businessman, as he would say it. So here we are. This idea of late creativity, well, he adopts somebody who we know was renowned for his late creativity, who remained an artist and a creative influencer right up to the end of his professional career, that being Picasso. And here, Jay-Z does a number of things. First of all, he shows acknowledges his age and that of his fans who are aging with him, aging in and with hip-hop. He also acknowledges, the idea that he's in fact a professional in all kinds of ways and a mature individual. Married to, maybe some of you know, he's married to Beyonce. They have a child together. So again, he's a father, he's a husband. He's not that scrappy, snotty-nosed kid on the streets anymore. And of course, in the beautiful, brilliant way that he is a wordsmith, he manages to, his brand management by flipping the lyrics in such a way that he disses the opposition, you blow, while pulling in Hublot watch. And I think this is an interesting kind of, I don't want to say that he's the paragon, but he represents a particular kind of aging at this point. So in terms of somebody who is a celebrity at that scale, who's earning money in hip-hop at that scale, who's remaining creative and innovative, and everybody who checks hip-hop follows him at this point in his career, I think he's at the furthest out there, what Chuck D calls rarefied air in hip-hop. I'll leave it there. Thank you.